So it is useful in many kinds of research to identify community needs. What, like the incident I just mentioned, what is it that the people want? Because if you start with what they want, there is acceptance. It's like teaching. If you start with what you know, you cannot really communicate to the students. You have to know the student also. You have to know what they want before you become a good teacher. Then, to identify change, action research, like this particular study which I mentioned about sanitation, it was aimed at changing the community practices to accept toilets. That's what is an action research. Then, there are many movements and struggles. It can be through a movement study. Recently, we have had Anna Hazare's campaign against corruption. There has been, so how do we document? This is valuable historical data. I know none of you are historians, so perhaps you may not understand the importance of history. Today, of course, you have the video recording, etc. But what was the dynamics? What was the conversation? What did people experience? How did it change their lives participating in that struggle? You can get it documented. It is current politics, but history as well. So it pass. Then it's also, now for instance, technology has been introduced into your classrooms in a big way. Increasingly, what you all will be pioneering or going ahead with is to change the face of classrooms. Now you can very well think of a study to what extent can distance learning modes through e-technologies undermine university strategies. How redundant will conventional universities become? So that could be a major area of study, in which case you need to study the impact of these programs. So it becomes very, very important, right? And to focus group discussions, naturally you can't go and interview each and everyone, but by organizing group discussions, you will be able to understand what people actually feel when technology is brought into their classroom, how receptive they are. Because I can tell you, before I go on, there was a small study I did in Australia actually. It was to look at the domestic violence situation in diaspora communities, how much access to Indian immigrants who are migrated from India have to the protective legislation and schemes given by Australian government. The point is, there's a lot of facilities, but it's all center linked through technology. It's not face-to-face contact always. So what happens to people who come from lower socio-economic background, who are not technologically savvy? So what access can they get? You see, there's a whole range of people who cannot access that service. So these are some of the issues which need to be looked at. So generally, as you saw in the picture, it's a group of 15 participants, and through discussions, we come to understanding what people really want. And each one's experience, the most important thing about it can go on. Normally these sessions are for about 90 minutes because we cannot take it on completely, especially when we are working class women or working class men. We have to be very careful about using their time, because it means one day's wage. Very often when we have conducted, my department has conducted these sessions, we go, they have sat in the marketplace, etc. Or in some NGO office, in the slums, in the village courtyard, and will show these things to you. And it's important that the group is homogeneous. You understand that in a classroom situation also. Because if there is a great hierarchy, say if you try to bring a rich woman with a poor woman, if you get your domestic servant with the mistress of the house, they are not going to talk. So it should be the same kind of people, more or less the same kind of background. See, there are differences how focus group sessions are conducted in India, in Indian social science practices and Western social science practices. Here you must remember that the people you are looking at are illiterate people. You can't make, and they don't have access to telephones, etc. So it's not that you make a phone call and get a group of people to come together. Or you write letters and people will respond. There are different techniques which we will be learning. And the focus group, naturally, we will be nothing, no research can happen without preparations. You have to be very clear what you will ask, how you want it's like any teaching program. You have to be prepared when you go to class. You can't go unprepared. So preparation is a very important part of any research. So it's not a debate. I don't get into you. I may not agree with you. I may have a different view. Say for instance, supposing we are discussing causes for domestic violence. I'm just giving an example. And these women will say, oh, this is because of sharab ke nashe. You know very well these are not correlated issues. Because domestic violence can happen even if there is no alcohol. There's no correlation between the two. It's an excuse. But you don't challenge, you don't contribute, you don't debate, you don't show off your knowledge. And say psychological studies say that this cannot happen. It doesn't happen. It's not group therapy. It's not a psychological counseling group therapy session. It's not conflict resolution. You know, that's a totally different thing. It's not an educational session. I'm not there to teach. As I told you in the situation of sanitation, the project aim was bringing sanitation to the village. But the project aim could be realized when the people began to, we didn't teach them, but they began to realize sanitation is important. Because there are other issues around sanitation also. If it is a community toilet, or should it be individual toilets attached to the houses? If it's a community toilet, the problem of who cleans it. Is it to be kept locked? All these other issues of managing the toilet comes up, isn't it? Oh. And it's not a promotional opportunity. It's not to promote, shall we say, technology or e-learning. It's behind it. Conflict is that there are people who fight, two factions. I'm not there to help them to solve the fight. Like India and Pakistan are fighting. I don't organize a focus group discussion to get them to resolve the border dispute. I'm giving you a very broad example, but I just want to make it honest. Okay. Now, when you decide, like I was telling you in Western literature, they'll say broadly you know whom you want to approach. Now, if you want to, if it's the sanitation project which I was telling you about, you obviously are not going to the richer hamlets or the households with toilets, but the poor side of the village where women are still going out into the open yards. So then the important thing is, how do you, so obviously you will approach them through the entry point is very important. All research data gets colored by the entry point. In another study on seafarers which was undertaken at our center, these were not my studies, but another very important lesson we learned there. This was, this particular researcher went to the Family Planning Association and asked to make use of their vehicles and went to the village. She was literally stoned out. Because with whom you go into the village, because you can't just walk up to people and say, hey, I'm a researcher, please fill up this questionnaire. You can't do that. You go through some power broker, some influential person in the community. That is the entry point I'm talking about. Now, very often you have to be very careful of this entry point because you have to be aware villages also have factional politics. People are fighting on. It's not that you go through the sarpanch, then people are scared of the sarpanch, they won't talk to you. So, who has wide acceptance? You have to be very careful about that. It may be an NGO who is working. In our research projects, we have always gone through some NGO who is working in that particular community. Then the discussion point. Here, your research topic is very important. Supposing you're looking at education outreach among girls or reasons for education dropouts. Let's make it simple among girls. You have qualified it. You had a question. You qualified it by saying girls. So you know where you're looking at. So you're narrowing down your research topic. And what are the points? Here your hypothesis come in. Your research questions come in handy. Why do girls drop out? So you have gone through other research studies. And then you're trying to verify are they applicable or not applicable to this particular community where girls don't go to school. Then when you go to the community, like you can't get people to talk. It's not that they are going to favor you. I know you're a little tired and sleepy. See, nobody is going to listen to you if you start talking. See, there is always a difference between the researcher and the researcher. I cannot wipe out the fact when I go to the community that I belong to the university, my level of education is much better than theirs. But I can't change my background entirely. I'm not going to try to tell lies. I will not try to go in a Kanjivaram sari with diamonds from me. It's like teaching also. You don't go in miniskirts to a classroom. You dress normally and you go to class. And but then when you go to the community, you dress normally. You don't go in very western clothes, etc. Because it's not accepted by them. They see us very different from them. But respect, the fundamentals of human relationship is respecting each other. And that is what you need to observe. And I think discussion points I told you about. So then you have to organize ice-breaking exercise. Very often they don't understand your research topic. Some introduction ice-breaking exercises you have to do. In a poor community sometimes, what you can use is the teaching methods of role play, dramatization, puppet show, etc. and get people to remark on it. Storytelling. All these techniques which you have learned as a teaching methodology, you can use. If it is, I'll tell you, when we went to the women scientists and the disease research institutes of India, we conducted focus group discussion. Because the basic question is, why are so few women in science? So INSA, that is the National Academy, Indian National Academy of Sciences, wanted to understand why women scientists, women are not pursuing scientific training. So one aspect we needed to look at is institutional mechanisms. Because are there any problems in the institution which make women leave science? At that point, we had to introduce the concept of sexual harassment. The first reaction which people said is, we don't face sexual, we have no problems. Absolutely, I am a scientist, I am highly educated, I have everything in life. To get them to do, we have to break the distance between myself and them. I cannot draw out information, whether they are rich or poor or whatever, without giving something back to them. I should be prepared to share. So the distance in these methods, the distance between myself and you as respondents are being reduced. We are all together in this exciting journey of knowledge creation. That's the important thing. So community entry point, it's come twice, I should have remembered. Obtaining informed consent. I think all of you know this as fine. So this is also the entry point. How do you do the entry? It's a little dark, I know. We have to go, like we went to the NGOs. We discussed the project with them. We took their help, whichever community we went to, whether it's in the villages or in the slums here, took their help to identify and get the women together. We had to explain. The other thing you have to make very clear to the women is, you cannot give them anything. Right? And now, today abroad, in the US for instance, when we do anthropological research among the Indian communities, etc., they do promise them money. You know, you give me an interview, I give you money. Because they can turn around and ask, what do I get? I'm giving you my time. I'm giving you my energy. We have to be very careful about not wasting people's time. But ideally, in good research, you don't give money or gifts or anything like that. Because then, they will tell you what you want to hear. I think it's a very bad practice. But, so we'll not get into that huge debate. But what you can do is respect them, give them a feedback. If they ask you a question, straight away,